Basically, when my mom died, what happened was I gave up living. I mean, I didn't contemplate suicide. It was that I just thought my life is over. And I just felt useless. I know how to do nothing. I didn't know how to shop. I didn't know how to sign a check. And I was like a prisoner in this apartment. And then I made it my prison.
She was once the face of American youth in the 1960s, a symbol of innocence, cheerfulness, and California sunshine. Her name was synonymous with Gidget, with golden beaches, and with the title of Most Promising New Star that Hollywood once celebrated. But that was only the surface. Inside, Sandra Dee was a childhood marked by abuse, a youth tightly controlled, a marriage fractured by suspicion and jealousy, the heartbreak of 7 miscarriages, and a life gradually unraveling due to eating disorders, alcoholism, and depression. She became a figure of mockery in Greece through the lyric, "Look at me, I'm Sandra Dee." But no one ever asked if it hurt her. She died of cancer and kidney failure after years of living in seclusion, never truly allowed to be herself. This is not just the story of a fallen star. It is the truth behind the spotlight, a truth never fully told. Sandra Dee was born Alexandra Symboliak Zuck on April 23, 1942, in Bayonne, New Jersey, to a Carpatho-Rusin family of Russian Orthodox faith. Her parents, John and Mary Zuck, met as teenagers at a local church dance, married young, and divorced when Sandra was just 5 years old. She never saw her father again for the rest of her life. A year after the divorce, Sandra's mother, Mary, married her former boss, an older real estate developer of Russian descent named Eugene Victor Duvon. The family moved in with Duvon, marking the beginning of a painful chapter in Sandra's life. Years later, she revealed that this was the most traumatic period of her existence. From the age of 5, Sandra was regularly abused by her stepfather, with the abuse escalating to sexual assault by age 8. Her mother, who controlled every aspect of her daughter's life, completely ignored this horrific reality. Sandra only escaped this nightmare when Duvon died of a heart attack in 1956 at age 57, while being treated at Georgetown Hospital in Washington, D.C. However, the tragedy was far from over. From a very young age, Sandra was molded into an entertainment product rather than a normal child. Her mother falsified her age, making her 2 years older to secure more job opportunities. By age 4, Sandra began modeling, appearing in television commercials for Coca-Cola and Coppertone. The cost was absolute control. Her mother enforced strict meal schedules and portion sizes, leading to the development of an eating disorder, anorexia, by age 9, a condition that haunted her for decades. Even during puberty, her chest was bound flat to maintain the adorable little girl image, preventing her from appearing too mature on screen. Everything was adjusted to make me just right, just thin enough, just innocent enough, just marketable enough, she once bitterly remarked. Behind the beautiful facade and innocent face in magazines was a girl growing up in an invisible cage, where every decision and emotion belonged to someone else. The first cracks in Sandra Dee's soul emerged here, and they would haunt her for the rest of her life. A childhood distorted by manipulation and driven by the pursuit of future fame laid a dark foundation for all the tragedies yet to come. Little Alexandra Zuck began working professionally before even starting elementary school. At the age of 4, she became a child model in New York, one of the most sought-after young faces in the television advertising market at the time. Under a new name given by her mother, Sandra Dee, she appeared regularly in major campaigns for Coca-Cola, Coppertone, and Canada Dry. By the time she was 14, she was earning over $75,000 a year, an astonishing figure that would later exceed what she made from acting in films. With her blonde hair, sun-kissed skin, and radiant smile, Sandra quickly became the ideal image of post-war American teens, youthful, likable, wholesome, and safe. It was a time when the U.S. was constructing an idealized version of womanhood in pop culture, and Sandra Dee was one of the first figures chosen to represent that image. However, the spotlight of early success did not come with freedom. Her entire schedule, appearance, and even diet were strictly controlled by her mother. Dee was forced to maintain a strict figure, bind her chest, and lie about her age to preserve her childlike image. By the age of 10, she had moved to Manhattan to attend the professional children's school, where classes were scheduled around photo shoots and auditions. She grew up in a fully programmed environment with no space for personal feelings. In 1957, at just 15, Sandra Dee landed her first film role in Until They Sail, MGM, starring alongside Gene Simmons and Paul Newman. Though it was a supporting role, her innocent demeanor, camera presence, and natural acting caught immediate attention. A year later, she starred opposite John Saxon in The Reluctant Debutante, officially stepping into the ranks of rising young stars. With 2 early films gaining strong attention, Sandra Dee was awarded the 1958 Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer, Female, and she quickly signed a long-term contract with Universal Pictures. She became one of the last contract players from the era when studios controlled every aspect of an actor's career. From then on, her name became synonymous with wholesome teen films, emotional young characters, and especially the media-crafted image of the perfect American girl. This was the phase where Sandra Dee transitioned from advertising to cultural icon, not through a breakout performance, but by embodying a meticulously polished image that felt almost unreal. But it was that very image that would later become the burden, casting a long shadow over the rest of her life. The biggest turning point in Sandra Dee's career came in 1959 when she appeared in Imitation of Life, directed by Douglas Sirk. The film wasn't just a box office hit, it shattered records, becoming the highest-grossing film in Universal Pictures history at the time. It earned over $6.4 million in the U.S. during its first year and more than $50 million worldwide based on ticket prices of that era. It became the 4th highest-grossing film of 1959 in America, trailing only Ben-Hur, Sleeping Beauty, and Operation Petticoat. Playing Sarah Jane, a rebellious teenage girl torn between identity, youth, and societal prejudice, Dee struck an emotional chord with audiences across generations. Though not the lead, her image dominated magazine covers, television features, and audience polls for months after the film's release. Theaters in major cities like Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles reported sold-out shows for 5 to 6 weeks straight, and Universal re-released the film widely in the early 1960s due to its enduring popularity. Following that phenomenal success, Sandra Dee rose to the top tier of young actors in Hollywood. She was grouped with the likes of Natalie Wood and Tuesday Weld as one of the most influential stars among the youth audience. Dee was not just a box office goddess. She became a national teen icon, with a flood of endorsement deals, merchandise tie-ins, and her likeness featured on postcards, student notebooks, and even fashion dolls. Later that same year, in late 1959, Universal, who held her exclusive contract, allowed Columbia Pictures to borrow her for a lead role, an extremely rare move at the time, especially for a rising young actress. In an era when studios tightly controlled their contracted stars, sharing someone like Dee wasn't just a commercial transaction, it was a bold vote of confidence in her mainstream appeal. The role Columbia offered her was Gidget, a cheeky, sweetly rebellious teenager daring to take up surfing, a sport still seen as the domain of men. Initially positioned as a light summer flick, Gidget became a surprise box office sensation, earning over $3.9 million in the U.S., a huge figure for teen films at the time. More importantly, Sandra Dee's portrayal of Gidget sparked a nationwide cultural craze around the surfer girl, spawning sequels, TV shows, toys, magazine covers, and a new teen lifestyle. With her beaming face, youthful voice, and petite frame in a one-piece swimsuit, Dee quickly became the new emblem of American youth, a model of energy with restraint, freedom within boundaries. In truth, Gidget would remain inseparably linked to Sandra Dee's name for the rest of her career. It brought her to the height of fame, but also locked her into the archetype of the innocent girl. A mask she would later admit, "I wasn't allowed to take off." If Gidget made Sandra Dee a teen icon, the string of films that followed solidified her position as one of the most bankable actresses of the early 1960s. In that same breakthrough year, 1959, she starred in A Summer Place, a romantic drama with rebellious undertones, where she played a young girl caught in a forbidden romance between two feuding families. Although its content faced conservative backlash at the time of release, the film became a runaway hit, thanks in part to the nationwide success of its theme song, Theme from a Summer Place. Teen audiences flocked to theaters, and Sandra Dee, with her wide eyes, fragile aura, and modestly rebellious charm, officially became the screen face of adolescent love's awakening in American cinema. From that point on, Dee had box office hits nearly every year. The Wild and the Innocent, 1959, capitalized on her image as a sweet Western frontier girl, while Portrait in Black, 1960, marked a slight shift into psychological thriller territory, where she starred alongside Lana Turner and Anthony Quinn in a tale of entanglement, suspicion, and betrayal. She also ventured into satirical comedy with Romanoff and Juliet, 1961, adapted from Peter Ustinov's play, a light-hearted yet biting commentary on the Cold War. That same year, she returned to sweet, teen-oriented fare with Tammy, Tell Me True, a follow-up in the already popular Tammy series. Audiences, especially high school girls and young mothers, flocked to theaters not just to watch Sandra Dee act, but to see her as a reassuring role model for innocent youth. These films didn't just succeed at the box office, they helped cement a consistent persona, Sandra Dee as the ideal good girl, always pure, soft-spoken, optimistic, and never crossing moral boundaries. But this very persona gradually became an invisible barrier, preventing her from accessing more mature, complex roles. And as audience tastes began to shift and Hollywood moved into its rebellious era, that image started to feel outdated. By 1961, Sandra Dee was not only a familiar face in theaters, but also one of the most beloved stars in America. According to the annual Quigley Publications poll, a highly respected benchmark in the film industry at the time, Dee ranked 6th among the top 10 box office stars in the U.S., alongside Doris Day, Rock Hudson, and Elizabeth Taylor. There was no doubt, she was a defining icon of the decade. Her career peaked in 1963 with the film Tammy and the Doctor, another installment in the popular Tammy series. In it, Dee fully embodied the image audiences had come to expect: a cheerful, wholesome, slightly dreamy young woman. The film was successful both financially and culturally, helping her retain her crown as the queen of feel-good, family-oriented cinema. Yet at the same time, it further locked her into a persona that was becoming increasingly out of touch, just as American pop culture was shifting into the age of the Beatles, rebellion, and personal liberation. Few know that during this period, Sandra Dee was Universal Studios' last remaining contract actress, a rare remnant of the old studio system, where film companies controlled everything from an actor's public image to their roles. As that system dissolved, Dee, who had spent her entire youth under its structure, struggled to find a new direction, burdened by a good girl image that no longer fit the times. Alongside her acting career, Sandra Dee also tried her hand at singing. She recorded a few singles, including When I Fall in Love, a gentle ballad that reflected her signature style: romantic, sweet, but never too rebellious. Although it didn't make a major splash, the effort revealed her desire to define herself beyond the mold that Hollywood had imposed on her for so many years. As if destined, everything came early for her, including marriage. In 1960, Sandra Dee was at the peak of her career. Only 18 years old, yet already a national teen icon. the face of multiple box office hits, and the subject of endless magazine covers. Amid a packed filming schedule, she accepted a role in Come September, a romantic comedy shot in the picturesque Liguria region of Italy. It was there that fate introduced her to Bobby Darin, a famous 1950s singer with a smooth voice and magnetic presence. Bobby hadn't joined the project as a lead actor, but to contribute the film's theme song and take on a small role. Still, from the very first meeting, he was captivated by Sandra Dee's freshness, reserve, and inner glow. She was 8 years younger and known for keeping a professional distance from her male co-stars. Darin made no effort to hide his intentions. He sent her flowers, wrote handwritten letters, and found every excuse to be near her on set. With his vibrant personality, Bobby used humor and relentless energy to break through Sandra's shell, one formed by years of overprotection from her controlling mother. Yet in contrast to Darin's instant attraction, Sandra Dee didn't like him at all at first. According to her own accounts and those of their son Bobby Darin in his memoir, Sandra found Bobby impulsive, overly confident, and clearly trying too hard to make an impression. She called him the kind of guy I would never date. But Bobby Darin, with his stubborn charm and unshakable confidence, didn't back down. He kept trying, joking, chatting, even deliberately acting over the top just to catch her attention. That persistence, combined with the romantic backdrop of filming in Europe, gradually changed the way Sandra saw him. From dislike came curiosity. From curiosity came love. Then, the unbelievable happened. After just 2 months of knowing each other, they held a quiet wedding in New Jersey on December 1st, 1960. The press called it Hollywood's fairy tale wedding, a union between two beautiful young stars at the height of their fame. But behind the glamour, their whirlwind decision reflected something deeper in Sandra Dee, a longing to be loved, to take control of her own life, and to finally break free from the suffocating grip of her ever-present mother. The ceremony was held in secret. No fanfare, no throng of celebrities or media, partly because Sandra was still upholding her pure girl image, and partly because they both understood how a rapidly blossomed romance between famous figures would be relentlessly scrutinized. But in the few rare photos released, both are smiling brightly, as if nothing in the world could hurt them. At 18, Sandra Dee entered marriage, not just with Bobby Darin, but with an entire adult world she had never truly been prepared to face. What seemed like a sweet beginning quickly gave way to a harsher reality. In December 1961, Sandra gave birth to their first child, Dodd Mitchell Darin. He would be their only child, the product of a love that began like a fairy tale. But becoming a mother at 19 brought challenges she never anticipated. Immediately after giving birth, doctors prescribed amphetamines to help her lose weight quickly, under pressure to regain her figure almost instantly. No one foresaw the consequences. Sandra Dee became dependent on the stimulant, not just physically, but emotionally. Fatigue, anxiety, and sudden mood swings became more and more frequent. She was America's good girl, the model of optimism and purity, and all exhaustion had to be hidden behind layers of makeup. Meanwhile, Bobby Darin was living a life that couldn't have been more different. Between tour dates and film sets, he was often absent during the most critical moments for the family. Talented, wealthy, and magnetic, Bobby was constantly surrounded by the limelight and the allure of show business, while Sandra, still just stepping into adulthood, found herself alone and hollow in the large Los Angeles home they shared. The years that followed were marked by one painful event after another. 7 miscarriages, an agonizing number that Sandra Dee later admitted robbed her of any sense of joy or hope in pregnancy. With each loss, her spirit eroded further, and her relationship with Bobby grew increasingly strained. He began to display insecurity and jealousy, frequently suspecting Sandra of affairs with her co-stars, most notably Peter Fonda, with whom she starred in a 1964 film. Though there was no concrete evidence, the mistrust only deepened the rift between them. Yet the greatest strain didn't come from within their relationship. It came from Sandra's mother, Mary Zuck. She never accepted Bobby Darin, believing he couldn't protect her daughter and wasn't clean enough for the image Sandra had so carefully built. Her ongoing, rigid interference only worsened an already fragile marriage. On numerous occasions, she was said to have sown doubt and orchestrated situations that triggered conflict between the couple. It was no longer a life shared between two people in love, but a quiet battlefield of love versus fame, physical and emotional wounds, and the suffocating watch of a mother who never let go. As for Bobby Darin, he was then at the peak of both his music and film career and couldn't be there for his wife as much as she needed. He was constantly touring, filming, and living at a frantic pace, almost as if he knew his time was limited. Bobby had suffered from rheumatic fever as a child and had once been told he wouldn't live past 16. He loved Sandra, but always felt he didn't have enough time or enough patience to truly understand the deep-rooted insecurities within her. He desperately wanted his wife to come with him, knowing full well that his days might be numbered. But Sandra, exhausted by anxiety, obsessed with her appearance, and haunted by the fear of losing another child, couldn't bear the thought of leaving her son or having to put on a public smile. Amid those mounting crises, she found herself caught in a storm of impossible expectations. Finally, in 1967, after 7 years together, they let go. They decided to divorce. After the divorce, the relationship between Sandra and Bobby didn't end. On the contrary, they began to talk more, like two old friends who understood each other after surviving a war. And then, during one of Bobby's serious illnesses, Sandra finally found the courage to tell him something she had never spoken aloud in her entire life: that she had been abused by her stepfather as a child. Bobby broke down in tears. Tears of regret for Sandra, for himself, and for the marriage that might have turned out differently if they had truly understood each other earlier. They had even talked about getting back together. But in 1973, Bobby Darin died after a 6-hour heart surgery. He passed away at the age of 37, and Sandra never had the chance to say another word to him again. She said only one thing: "Bobby was the love of my life." And for the rest of her days, she never said otherwise. After losing Bobby, Sandra Dee fell into a deep depression. She was trapped in mental chaos, spiraling into a darkness from which she could not escape. Alcohol became her only refuge. After her mother passed away from cancer in 1987, Sandra's condition worsened. She nearly collapsed entirely, weighing less than 80 pounds and drinking up to a liter of scotch a day. Her son, Bobby Darin, had to admit her into a treatment center. Thanks to his persistence, Sandra slowly overcame her addiction and regained a fragile sense of stability. Yet the physical and emotional scars never truly let go. In 2000, she was diagnosed with throat cancer and chronic kidney failure, requiring regular dialysis to stay alive. During a brief period of recovery, Sandra made a modest return to the stage in Love Letters, performing alongside her former co-star John Saxon, but it was only a flickering light in the middle of a long, dark night. Her final television interview in 1991, which she had hoped would open a new chapter, instead shocked many viewers. They no longer saw the golden girl of yesterday, but a frail woman with a trembling voice and eyes that drifted constantly between the past and the present. Some criticized her for seeming weak and faded. Others felt pity but didn't know how to express it. It was that wave of public scrutiny and mixed reactions from the press and audiences alike that led Sandra Dee to withdraw completely from the public eye. She never appeared on television or at any public event again. Though she had successfully overcome addiction, her body had long been depleted. Sandra Dee took her last breath on February 20th, 2005 in California at the age of 62. She passed away quietly, just as she had chosen to live her final years, without noise, without a stage, leaving behind only memories, pain, and a love that never faded. By her side in those final moments were her son, Dodd, and her granddaughter, Alexa. They bore witness to a harsh truth, that behind the bright, innocent smile of long ago was a soul that had fought silently for nearly half a century. Her remains were laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills, a resting place for many screen legends. There, at a simple grave marker, only those who truly loved her remember the woman who was once an icon. Sandra Dee left behind one son, Bobby Darin, and two granddaughters, Alexa and Olivia. They are not just family, but the last living pieces of a legend, someone who was once adored by all of America, then forgotten, and finally mourned. And in that confession, her true legacy began to emerge. Sandra Dee didn't just represent a look. She became the voice of those who had been boxed in, stifled by societal expectations. When the truth came out about her abusive childhood, the miscarriages, and her lifelong battle with eating disorders, her story became a mirror for the public to reflect on the price of fame and the harmful ideals the entertainment industry imposes on women. Her son, Bobby Darin, recounted that journey in his memoir, Dream Lovers, while Kevin Spacey brought his parents' tragic love story to the screen in Beyond the Sea, 2004. Neither work idolized her. Instead, they offered quiet empathy for a woman once seen as flawless, who in reality carried wounds too deep to name. Though her life was shadowed by darkness, Sandra Dee remains an inseparable part of post-war American culture. A symbol, as New York Times critic Dave Kerr once described, bright, cheerful, bathed in California sunlight, but also a reminder that sometimes that light comes from a place very deep and very dark within. Sandra Dee wasn't just a name in film history. She was a symbol of a generation that once believed innocence and stardom could coexist. But her life stands as a bitter reminder. Sometimes the brightest lights hide the deepest wounds. From a tightly controlled little girl to a woman living in silence and pain, Sandra experienced every shade of fame, glory, loneliness, and ultimately oblivion. Her glittering roles were only a small part of who she really was, a soul yearning for freedom, yet trapped in a mold she could never escape. Though she was never able to break free from the very image that made her famous, Sandra Dee left an enduring impression as a symbol of classic beauty and as an echo from a time when women were not allowed to truly be themselves. What do you think about Sandra Dee's turbulent, quiet journey? Was it a tragedy carefully disguised, or a legacy worth honoring from someone who lived and loved in her own way? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to click like and subscribe to follow more honest stories behind the spotlight. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.